Right. Hello, everyone. I'm back. Sorry about that. I will share my screen if that's okay. So I was a bilateral diplomat in the British system for a long time, and then I left and do stuff like this now. We've just been celebrating the King, and I just thought you might be interested in seeing the original, very old-fashioned formal letter I got when I joined the diplomatic service, signed by the Queen, going right back to when was it, 80 or so. And the language of it's very interesting because it hasn't really changed in 1,000 years when you actually read it closely. I started my career actually in 1979. That's right. The first job I had was to help organize the state visit of the President of Indonesia to London 6 weeks after I joined the diplomatic service. And there is the President of Indonesia and the Queen. And you can't quite see me in that picture, but I was standing there outside the Foreign Office as the carriage walked past, and I had to produce the guest list for 600 people at the city banquet and 150 people for the Buckingham Palace banquet. That was my first literal job in diplomacy before they had word processors. And I ended my career in this parade going to Buckingham Palace. This is the President of Poland going to Buckingham Palace for his state visit in 2004. And I was in one of those carriages, which is, it's always much better to be in the carriage than just standing outside looking at the carriage. I'll make that clear. This is my book. Anyone who wants it, they just have to give me money. Does anyone know the answer to this? It's not what you say, it's... Put it in the chat, please. Let's see who's smart here. It's not what you say, it's... Okay, we've got Lydia, Dayon, Kristen, Tracy. Most people are saying it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And that's the typical answer, but that's wrong. Some people say it's not what you say, it's what you don't say. Or it's what you mean, blah, 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 blah. But I think this is, for me, one of the key points of protocol. It picks up actually what the last speaker was saying and what Nicoletta was saying. It's not what you say, it's what they hear. You can say what you like, but if they're hearing obnoxious, if they're hearing, racist or stupid or doesn't care or lazy or whatever, that's what they're hearing. And so I think it really picks up what Nicoletta says. What are people getting from the experience with you, really? This is right at the very heart of it. And that's what I sort of want to talk about quickly today. One of the things they hear is your tone. Are you optimistic or pessimistic? Are you cautious or are you bold? Whatever, there are lots of choices. And they also hear your values. And they hear these things almost before you've said a word sometimes. So there's a lot going on in communication, which is really what protocol is about, I suppose, in the end, when it comes down to it. And I think I put this on last year, so some of you will remember this from last year. But what is the top protocol quality of these things? They're all important, for sure. What's the one, do you think, that is the sort of pivot for all the others? Put it in the chat quickly. Let's see what people say. You've got 10 seconds to write something. We've got respect coming up very strongly. Anyone else? Quickly. Courtesy, common sense, respect, courtesy. Ah, Christelle. Christelle nails it. Accuracy, guys. Because all the other things are important. You can be incredibly courteous. You can be incredibly polite. But if you get up and say, hello, I'm very pleased to be here on my first visit to Peru, and you are actually in Chile, you look like an idiot. This is the problem. So accuracy sort of is a bedrock for all the other things. And that's what I'm actually going to talk about today. What had happened there? This is John Kerry when he's Secretary of State. He goes to number 10 Downing Street. The media are all, they open the door for him at the front door there, funny house in London. The media say, can we have a picture? And he turns around to have the picture and they shut the door, so it looks pretty. He turns around, bangs his head on the door because the door's shut and he thought it was open. So that is the headline from his visit. It's not what you say, it's what they hear. And what they hear is John Kerry is the guy who walks into doors. Sort of weird bad luck. This was another one. I was there when this happened. Tony Blair was, when he was Prime Minister, is meeting President Kaczynski of Poland, who later died in the Smolensk air crash. And they would, one of the questions came up from the audience, what about all the Polish migration to the UK since Poland joined the EU? And the Polish president talked in Polish and gave a nice reply saying, the great mass of people are hardworking and want to do a good job. One or two, who aren't like that, and that's fine. And his interpreter wanted to show off his command of English. So he translated what the president said as, well, of course, there are some feckless Poles coming over to the UK. Feckless is a word you can go through 80 years in the UK and never hear anyone say. But feckless means sort of wasting time, wasting money, a bit sort of cheating, messing around, lazy, doesn't care. And that is the headline in the papers the next day. Britain taking in feckless Poles. And all this was because the Polish president's interpreter wanted to show off. Hopeless. So there's a thin line, folks, between accuracy and stupidity. I talked about this last year, but when things go wrong, it's often because people just aren't thinking about what they're doing. Now, you won't know who this is. This is a woman who works for now. She's a big senior executive of a European oil company. And when I met her, she was a locally engaged officer at the British Embassy in Warsaw. And she was had one of the more senior jobs there, but in the great scheme of things, it wasn't as important as being a European oil executive. Anyway, so she left and got a fantastic job and is now having this major corporate responsibility. And a year or so ago, I bumped into her in a restaurant in Warsaw. We went off and had a drink, and she was telling me about what it was like working for me as ambassador. And she said there was this one occasion when the minister arrived at the airport, and we'd prepared a program for him, a little fold over program which he could put in his pocket, which had, details of the program and what was going on and the emergency numbers, all this stuff. And as I was at the airport looking at this thing, I spotted a typing mistake on the front page. So I phoned up the embassy, said, do it again, and we'll give it to him when he gets to the residence rather than give it to him at the airport. And she said she was one of the people having to deal with this. She said, you bastard, we hated you so much as ambassador because it's a stupid typing mistake. Who the hell cares? And she said, now I'm a CEO. I understand why you did it. And you were absolutely right. This is the point. We're down in the basement. People are tired and fed up. They don't get the glory of the visit. They don't get to be on TV. They're just doing the hard work. There's a typo, so what? But it makes such a difference in terms of what you hear. You don't want the minister, the first thing he hears is these people can't spell English. This is incompetent. And so this is the point of my presentation today, dear colleagues. I aimed as ambassador for 100%. No compromise. If it's not 100%, do it again. And I once was talking to a British Army general, a senior general. He said he always aims for 85%. Because he said, if you try to get to 100%, you will end up wasting an incredible amount of time. And that will probably stop you getting to 85% in other areas. It's 85% consistently is good enough. And so this is the question I want to pose to you today. Are we in protocol 100% people, or are we 85% people? Because there's a case for both. Or are we sort of 96.5% people? What are we doing when we talk about precision in protocol? What's this about? This is the question. So here is a micromanager saying to his poor colleague, there is no hyphen in micromanager. This guy is being very annoying. And so the tension in protocol is typically the more senior you are, the more you know about visits, the more you know about banquets, the more you know about organizing events, because you've just done it a lot. And so there's a tendency to want to sort of fiddle in every detail. But if you do that, you're a crazy micromanager. And other people have to learn, and they have to learn from their mistakes as well. So that balance is actually genuinely hard. I want to show you this example. The man on the left is Robin Rennick, the British ambassador to South Africa, as he then was in 1991. This was, you probably know the man on the right. This is Nelson Mandela. I was the first secretary at the embassy in South Africa, standing there in the room when this party was happening. And I want to show you a picture of Rennick, because Rennick was a fanatical 100% person. And we had a visit of the, because of apartheid, we didn't have many British ministers coming to South Africa. So there was one visit of the aid minister. And he got incredibly involved in the detail, to the point where he said, listen, when she gets off the plane, we've got to have 2 cars there in case the first car breaks down. Doesn't matter what it costs, get another car ready to go. So we all said, fine. So on the day, he was very, very stressed because he wanted this to be a big success. And the driver of the first car, it was a hired car because it was a hired van. We didn't have the right vans in the embassy. We hired one, it was fine. But they had a special security lock thing on the key, so that you had to put the key in the thing to turn on the engine, but you also had to add a little gadget to turn on the key. And the guy was so stressed out by the ambassador, he couldn't start the car. So they all had to jump out and get in the second car. And then he said, look, thank God we have a second car here, as if that showed how clever he was. But he'd made the second car necessary by getting everyone so stressed. But this thing, you know, it's very lonely being a senior visitor. You get out of the car or you go into the room for the meeting, you are 100% in the hands of other people. What the hell is going to happen next? You don't know. You've got the program, but you don't know what's actually going to happen. Has someone messed this up? And will I end up looking stupid or weak? This is the drama of protocol when you're actually there in the moment.
Today in Brussels, today in Geneva, a meeting between Hillary Clinton and the Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov, their first big get-together. She presented him a gift, which was supposed to be a reset button, but the State Department got it a little bit wrong. Let's watch.
I wanted to present you, which represents what President Obama and Vice President Biden and I have been saying, and that is, we want to reset our relationship. And so we will do it together.
Thank you very much.
You are very welcome. We worked hard to get the right Russian word. Do you think we got it?
You get it wrong.
I got it wrong.
It should be перезагрузка. And this says перегрузка, which means overcharge.
Well, we won't let you do that to us.
The work that went into this is actually quite a clever idea, but the Americans at the highest level got the Russian translation wrong. This, for me, is an unforgivable mistake. I don't know how that actually could have happened. That at that level, they hadn't run this past at least 10 Russians just to check they had it 100% right, because it's a very high profile, major global sort of icon, if you like. And that stupid little reset button will be on the desk of every Russian foreign minister for the next 100 years as they laugh at what goes on in Washington. So guys, it's all about details, the distances, the traffic, the right building. Have you gone to the right door? Are you sure it's the door at the ministry that you're meant to be going to? Handshakes, all this stuff. It's all about everything. And the trouble is there's an awful lot of detail, and trying to work out in that detail, are we dealing with 85% or 100%, is a very difficult problem. Actual practical problem if you're organizing anything. So you check the details. What are the possible mess ups? How likely are they? And what scale of a mess will they create? They may be very likely to mess up, but they don't matter very much. They may be very unlikely to mess up, but if they do mess up, the scale of the mess will be enormous. So that requires you to think very hard about what your details represent. Another British Army officer once told me, he said, when he's organizing anything, he says, listen, what are the possible mess ups and how likely are they? So they say, well, look, this is likely to be a mess up and it could be very big. And what about this? And what about this? And the only thing really that we're pretty sure about is this thing, 5% chance of mess up. He says, focus on that because the other things are obvious. You know, it's obvious if you understand what the big mess ups are, but it's the little things that kill you. So here's the Queen when she went to Washington. The podium was designed for President Bush, but no one on the British side, this is the British side's fault, had thought about how high the podium is vis-a-vis the Queen. So on the TV pictures of the visit, all you could see was the Queen's hat. You couldn't see the Queen's face at all. And so the whole visit became about hats, because that weird detail no one had thought about. This is, you know, before people were as conscious of the TV as they are now. Flags, you know, getting the wrong flag. It's just happens so often. And it's sort of strange how it does happen. But, you know, flags sometimes look the same. And this one where they got the right flag, this was in Korea. But they were visiting, it looks like the Spanish flag there, is it? But anyway, for some reason, they got a new Korean flag and just took it out of the packet and it was all creased. So it just looks terrible. No one had looked at the thing to say, how do we smooth it out so it looks elegant? So the poor Korean official, protocol official who did this was sacked on the spot because it was just so humiliating for the Koreans that their flag looked, you know, terrible. So you make plans for all this stuff, but then what if the plan fails? And this is a lovely example I like to give. This is Mr. Ahtisaari, who was the, you know, a top president of Finland, but then he became a global mediator. And before he was doing all that, he was a senior Finnish diplomat, and he went to Paris for a conference. He was the leader of the delegation. You know, must have been about 10 or 12 of them on the delegation. They got off the plane. There were some cars waiting for them. They all got in the cars, zoomed off to the conference center. They get to the conference center. It becomes clear they have not brought Mr. Ahtisaari with them because he went to the men's room at the airport. They just left him behind. So he got a taxi to the conference. And he said, this is what the ambassador told me. He went to his seat and he said in a stoic way, Mr. Chairman, when plan and reality do not meet, we follow the plan, which is a wonderful, you know, we have the plans, but does the plan fit reality? Not always. So a great practical way to start thinking about this, if you're involved in practical protocol, is what exactly happens on the day? Put yourself not at the point of view of the organizer, but the point of view of the visitor or the point of view of the VIP at the center of the action. What are they going to see? If they're getting up to make a speech, I tell everyone this when I'm doing speech writing for people, ask for a photograph of the room. What does the room look like? So they know exactly what they're going to expect. Is there a roving microphone? Is there a podium? What exactly will happen involving them? So they at least get some sense of what they can expect. That's Mr. Obama, President Obama, driving out of the American embassy in Dublin. Everyone who'd done the recce, they drove out, but they didn't drive out in his huge, heavy car. It got stuck. So he had to get out of the car and then go out another entrance somewhere. And the whole thing was delayed for half an hour while they messed around with that because no one had thought about what actually happens on the day. And this is the one of the Queen's Rolls Royces. And we had this in Moscow. When the Queen went on her state visit to Moscow, she brought out one of her beautiful Rolls Royces to Moscow. They put this thing on a lorry in London. They drove it all the way across Europe to Moscow. No one had thought how you get it off the lorry. Everyone had assumed they would be fine at the other end. And so they were driving around Moscow railway stations in the middle of the night, trying to find a sort of way you could get the thing off the lorry with, because it's a very heavy car, without the thing being smashed. What exactly is the experience on the day? And that isn't just for the VIP, it may be for the VIP's vehicles as well. This is the Queen. I was at that banquet. I was standing, 5 meters away from them when the Queen and President Yeltsin had the toast in Moscow at the state banquet in the Kremlin. She then the next day went on a walkabout with President Yeltsin in Red Square. So this was her opportunity for the Queen to greet the Russian people. And so she went to Red Square. She arrives at Red Square. She gets out of the car. Red Square is completely deserted because the Russian KGB security people have cleared the square in case someone throws something else in. So they put some pictures up of it to make it look as if there was a big crowd. There was no one there except these people. And the Queen said, "Oh, I thought I was going to meet someone," but turned out she wasn't. There we are. Gifts. I think I told you this story last year, but maybe some of you didn't hear it. This was the flag of the revolution in Romania when Ceausescu fell in the late 89? Yeah, late 1980s, 1990 or so. And the flag was the symbol of the communist, the flag of Romania with a communist symbol cut out the middle. And then a year or so after this, the president of Romania went to Washington to meet President Clinton, and he gave him one of these flags with the hole cut out of the middle as a symbol of, gratitude for America's support for Romania's revolution and democracy, blah, 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 in Romania. They got a nice reply 6 weeks later from President Clinton's office saying the president was delighted with a beautiful poncho. They thought that he'd given him a Romanian poncho. True story. You can't believe it, but this is, these are things that happen. Speeches are tricky. Wrong speech. I'll show you this picture because this is the Queen's youngest son, Prince Edward, and he and his wife came to Poland on a visit. And this was a blunder by the British. You should have known better. He went to the British Council office in Warsaw for an exhibition they were doing, and he prepared his speech talking about the nice things about the exhibition, about climate and young people and all the stuff he was going to do. And the head of the British Council office got up and just talked and talked and talked and said everything he was going to say. And then she said, "Well, I'd like Royal Highness to give his speech." He said, "Well, you've heard everything. I'm not going to give a speech now." He was so angry that she had made it all about her and not about him. It's all about the visitor's experience. The visitor doesn't want to listen to you. The visitor wants to do his thing and then go and meet people. Terrible mistake by that particular colleague of mine.
So today, Dr. Oz is going to be standing with Donald Trump on the stage. And I'm going to be proud to be standing with a president that is 100% sedition-free. I'm running to serve Pennsylvania.
Good morning, everybody. It is wonderful to see all of you, and I want to thank everybody who's here. I think there's only one problem, and that is that my remarks are not sitting here. People, things by Friday afternoon, things get a little challenged. I'm going to answer a question at the end of the remarks, but I want to make sure that we get the remarks out. People. Oh goodness. Oh, somebody's tripping. I mean, don't fire. Folks are sweating back there.
Look
right now.
how he does that with a lot of charm. He hasn't got his speech. He hasn't got a teleprompter. Someone has forgotten to put the speech on the president's podium on the Friday afternoon. But he deals with it beautifully by making a joke about it, and then people end up liking him more. But you need to be a leader with a real high sense of emotional intelligence not to get angry in that situation, because it could be embarrassing, but he doesn't make it embarrassing. And then we've had a one where the person has talked too much and basically trumped the main visitor's speech. We've had one where there wasn't a speech at all. And here, President Robert Mugabe reads out the wrong speech. It was a speech for another occasion. You say, well, how the hell could that happen?
You have been relentless in holding decision makers to account. No. I think that I was given the wrong speech. But... I'm going to speak to the group of young people afterwards, and there was a small confusion. But, I apologize.
You've got to remember that these senior people, someone like the UN Secretary General at the big global conference, may be giving 8 speeches in a day. And the actual process from making sure that it gets into his hand at the right time isn't totally straightforward, partly because the drafts may be changing because of what's going on at the conference. So, it's hard at this high level, but it just goes to show, even at the very highest level, with all the best paid protocol people in the world, there can be mess ups. But I think, but what Obama did there, and I think the UN Secretary General didn't do there, they didn't panic. You mustn't panic when something goes wrong. And this is ultimately, it's not your job to stop your leader panicking, but you just have to hope they're smart enough not to panic. You have to keep control. Now, I think, I can't remember if you put this quiz question in last year, but you are the foreign minister of this particular country, and your ministry hosts a beautiful diplomatic ball, and you're there with the ambassadors and other guests, and the protocol officer, the national protocol officer, gets up to welcome everybody, but he doesn't mention you. And you're not sure why. Was it a mistake, or is it a provocation, or, what's happening here? So you're the foreign minister at the ball you're hosting. What do? Do you take the microphone and say some words of welcome as if nothing had happened? Or do you make a short speech but include a joke about the protocol officer? Or do you do nothing and just have a quiet word with the protocol officer as the ball carries on? Or do you do nothing but next day call in the protocol officer and, give him a mother of all warnings? Or do you swear angrily in a loud voice, say something really rude and violent, and then storm out of the ball and ruin the event for everybody? These are your options, probably with 1 or 2 sub-variations. What would, just quickly in the chat, what would everyone do of those options if you are the foreign minister yourself? We've got 2 votes for 2. 3 votes for 2. Come on, quickly, guys. 1. Quickly. Is anyone here actually still here? 3. 2, 3, 1. Emmanuel says 5. He gets the right answer. This is what actually happened. The foreign minister just said, "You MFs," and in Polish, and stormed out of the ball and ruined the whole evening. And this is the chap. How do you account for this? Very hard to say. The thing, guys, is accuracy. Friends love your mistakes, but your enemies love your mistakes. Mistakes come in all shapes and sizes, as we've seen. And so it's this question, really. How do you get towards 100%? Not just in this area, but if you've got 5 visits going on at the same time, maybe it's not realistic to get to 100%. So how do you then organize your thoughts and your people and your time and your emails at least to get a solid 85%? There isn't the right answer to this question, folks. But the key thing to know is why the question is subtle and important and interesting. And that's it. Thank you.